My name is Aria. I grew up in Tulsa, where the air always smelled like hot metal and rain that never came. Our house sat on the edge of town, peeling paint into porch light that hummed like it had something to say. Inside, everything revolved around my father. His work boots by the door, his glass on the table, his voice filling every room. He was the weather, and the rest of us just adjusted. When my mother died, I was 7. She was the soft part of the house, the smell of drugstore perfume, the sound of someone humming while folding laundry. After she was gone, the silence got heavy like the walls were listening. People said, "She's in a better place," but I didn't know where that was. All I knew was that she left, and I stayed. Dad called me his angel, when he was sober, and kid when he wasn't. He wasn't a monster, not in the way movies show. He was just a man who'd lost too much and didn't know what to do with the space it left behind. His grief didn't come in tears, and it came in rules. Don't go out. Don't bring anyone home. Don't ask questions. I thought it was protection. I called it love because I didn't know any better word for fear that pretends to care. By 13, the air inside that house changed. He started bringing friends home from work, men with wedding rings and rough hands, men who smelled like beer and gasoline. At first it was small. Come say hi. Be polite. Then stay. I remember the first time a hand rested on my shoulder too long. I remember how everything in me wanted to leave, but my body stayed. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I learned how to disappear without going anywhere. That's how it went for years. A slow, quiet kind of violence. I learned how to count seconds instead of breaths. How to make my face empty. How to look at the ceiling and not at them. My father would sit in the chair, I'm always the same one, and watch. He never said a word. Sometimes he laughed. That sound still sits in my stomach like glass. People ask, how could he? I stopped asking that question a long time ago. Monsters don't need reasons. They just need silence. At school, I pretended. My grades were fine. I smiled enough. I never invited anyone home. One day in health class, a woman came in to talk about safe adults. She said, if someone lets others touch you, it's not love. It's abuse. I wrote that sentence down and folded it into my notebook like a secret. That night, I read it over and over again until the words stopped feeling like someone else's and started feeling like mine. I tried to tell once, just a piece, not the whole thing. I told a school counselor that home felt wrong. She said we'd talk again soon, but by the time I walked home that day, my father was waiting on the porch, his face already knowing something he shouldn't have known. I never tried again. When you live in fear long enough, time doesn't move forward. It just circles. Days become copies of each other. You learn to survive by pretending you're somewhere else. Someone else. I used to imagine there was another version of me walking around in the world free. I'd close my eyes and see her. Hair blowing in the wind. No one watching her. No one waiting for her to flinch. I used to think if I believed in her hard enough, I'd turn into her. At 16, something cracked. I'd met a boy, kind eyes, steady voice. He told me what was happening wasn't normal, and I believed him because I needed to. He said I deserved better, and I wanted to see what that looked like. One night, after another of those endless evenings, I stood up from the couch and said, I'm leaving. Just like that. No plan, no courage. Just exhaustion dressed up as bravery. He didn't stop me. He didn't yell. He just said, you always were ungrateful. Then he turned back to the TV. Like I was just another noise he could mute. I walked out with a plastic grocery bag, one t-shirt, a toothbrush, bus schedules I'd been stealing for months. The air outside smelled like rain again, but this time I didn't wait for it. I just walked. People think running away is freedom. It's not. It's just movement. For a long time I didn't feel free. I just felt gone. But even that was better than being there. I found couches to sleep on, diners that stayed open late, bathrooms where I could wash the day off my skin. I told myself I'd never go back. And I didn't. That night was the end of one life and the start of another. Not cleaner, not safer, but mine. I didn't know it then, but surviving that house wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of learning how to live without asking permission to exist. The first months after I left were a blur. Nights that didn't end, mornings that didn't begin. I crashed on couches, in cars, sometimes on floors that smelled like strangers. Freedom looked different when you were hungry. Still, it was better than home. Even the cold felt kinder. The boy I left with, the one who'd said I deserved better, became my world at first. He was the first person who ever asked what I wanted to eat, who ever said goodnight like he meant it. I mistook that for love. Maybe it was love in the beginning. Or maybe it was just two broken people trying to build a shelter out of each other's damage. He had his own ghosts. Anger that came from nowhere. Silences that lasted for days. I used to think if I stayed quiet enough, he'd calm down. That's the curse of surviving abuse. You learn how to make yourself small even when you don't have to anymore. You mistake peace for walking on eggshells. You confuse control with safety. The first time he hit me, it wasn't even a fight. I'd come home late from work, a diner on the edge of town, coffee and grease in my hair, and he accused me of lying about where I'd been. It happened fast. His hand, my cheek, the sound of my own disbelief. Then came the apologies, the crying, the promises. And just like that, I forgave him. Because I was trained to. We moved apartments 3 times in 2 years. I thought the new walls would fix us. They didn't. Every new place started the same way. Clean sheets, soft voices, hope. Then came the yelling, the holes in the drywall, the neighbors pretending not to hear. Each time he said, "You made me do it," I believed him a little less, but I still stayed. Survival isn't bravery. Sometimes it's just habit. I started working longer shifts, saving small bills in the lining of my purse. I'd count them at night, whispering numbers like prayers. I didn't know what I was saving for. Maybe a room, maybe a bus ticket, maybe just proof that I could still plan a future. One night, he didn't come home. Hours passed. I sat on the couch, staring at the door, waiting for the sound of his keys. When he finally stumbled in, he smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, just a soft final break. He went to sleep, and I sat awake until morning. When the sun came through the blinds, I packed a bag and left again. No shouting this time, no goodbye, just quiet. I got a job cleaning motel rooms off the highway. The manager paid cash and didn't ask questions. That suited me fine. I learned how to make beds in 3 minutes flat, how to fold towels into swans, how to scrub away other people's stories. The rooms changed daily, but the mess was always the same. Bottles, makeup, sometimes blood. I started to understand that pain has geography. It leaves traces wherever people hide. At night, I'd walk to the diner next door and sit at the counter with a cup of coffee I could barely afford. The waitress there, Donna, had silver hair and a voice that could slice through smoke. She never asked about my past, but she started saving me leftovers in foil. One night she said, "You're too young to look this tired." I wanted to tell her everything. Instead, I said, "It's been a long week." She nodded. "It's always a long week for girls like us," she said. That sentence stayed with me. Girls like us. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but I knew it was true. It took months before I started to feel like a person again. I stopped flinching at sudden noises. I stopped counting steps between doors. I even laughed once, quietly, at something Donna said. It startled me, like the sound had escaped from someone else's mouth. I rented a small room above the laundromat where I worked part-time folding sheets. The window faced the neon sign outside, so the room was always pink at night. I liked it. It made me feel like I was living inside a movie no one else could see. I bought a notebook from the dollar store and started writing. Not about the bad parts, and not yet, but about tiny things. The way coffee smells when the air is cold. The way clean sheets feel after a long shift, the sound of someone laughing at the next table. I wanted to collect proof that the world still had gentle corners, but healing doesn't move in straight lines. Some nights I'd wake up sweating, sure I heard his voice, or my father's laugh, or the clink of that same glass on the table. The past didn't vanish. It just waited for quiet to come back. I started using just a little, I told myself. Something to blur the edges, to make sleep easier. The first time felt harmless. The second time felt necessary. By the third, it felt like coming home to something dangerous but familiar. Addiction doesn't always look like ruin. Sometimes it looks like relief. When I finally looked in the mirror and didn't recognize my own face, I stopped. Not for long, but long enough to know I could. I told myself that was strength. Maybe it was. Maybe it was just another kind of survival. Years passed like that. Working, quitting, starting over, leaving, coming back. I became good at disappearing. But even ghosts want to be seen. I didn't know it then, but somewhere inside all that running, I was still searching for a place where silence didn't mean danger. That's what freedom started to look like to me. Not escape, not revenge, just a room where I could breathe without waiting for someone to knock. Here's a quiet that comes after chaos. Not peace, not safety, just absence. That's what my life became for a while. The absence of noise, the absence of anyone else's voice in the room. I thought that was healing. It wasn't, it was just empty. The room I lived in was barely bigger than a closet. One window, one chair, one bed with springs that squeaked every time I turned. The pink neon light from the laundromat sign painted everything in soft artificial warmth. I liked to imagine it was a kind of protection, light that pretended to be sunlight. Most mornings I woke before dawn. The city outside was still half asleep, the air thick with detergent and rain. I'd make instant coffee and sit on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, watching steam rise from the cup. Sometimes I didn't drink it. I just liked holding something warm. When you've lived in fear long enough, quiet feels dangerous. I used to catch myself listening for footsteps, even when I knew no one was there. My body didn't understand that the danger was gone. It kept waiting for the next command, so I gave myself new ones. Small, harmless instructions: wake up, make the bed, write one page, breathe. It sounds simple, but it wasn't. Writing was the hardest part. The moment the pen touched the paper, ghosts came crawling out. Not in order, it's never in order, just flashes. My father's laugh, the smell of beer, the sound of a zipper. I'd drop the pen, pace the room, press my palms to my face like I could push the memories back inside. But words have a way of insisting. Once they start to come, they don't stop. I started writing late at night instead, when the streets went silent and it felt like no one could hear me. That's when I began to tell myself the truth, line by line. Sometimes the truth sounded like confession, sometimes it sounded like prayer. There were days I couldn't leave the room. The air outside felt too bright, too sharp. I'd wrap myself in a towel after showering and sit by the window, watching people walk by, mothers with kids, couples arguing softly, delivery men hauling boxes. Ordinary lives. I envied their ordinariness more than anything. I tried to join it once. Got a job at a bookstore downtown. I liked the smell of paper, the quiet hum of pages turning. But being around people made me nervous. Every laugh sounded like it was about me. Every sudden movement made my heart race. After 2 weeks, I quit. The manager said, "You'll find something else." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. Finding something else was never the problem. Keeping it was, Donna, the waitress from the diner, still checked on me sometimes. She'd knock on my door and leave food if I didn't answer. One night she said, "You should come to group. Tuesday nights. We just talk." I told her I didn't need therapy. She said, "It's not therapy. It's just not being alone." I went. The room was in the basement of a church. Coffee stains on the carpet, a circle of folding chairs, a smell of stale sugar and incense. Everyone there had a story. Some worse, some quieter, all heavy. When it was my turn to speak, I said, "I don't know what to say." A man across from me smiled gently. "Then start there," he said. So I did. I started talking, slowly, clumsily. I didn't tell everything at once when I couldn't, but I said enough for the air to shift. And something strange happened. No one looked away. No one flinched. No one tried to fix me. They just listened. That night I walked home and cried harder than I had in years. Not because I was sad, because I finally wasn't invisible. Healing doesn't happen the way movies show it. There's no music, no sunrise montage. It's long, uneven work. Some nights I felt like I was drowning in old memories. Other nights I'd laugh at something small and realize I'd gone a whole hour without feeling broken. I started painting, cheap watercolors from a discount store. I didn't know what I was doing. I just liked watching colors bleed together. One night I spilled coffee across a page and it looked like a storm. I kept it. It reminded me that accidents could be beautiful too. Then came the letter. It was from my father. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years. My hands shook opening it. The first line said, "I heard you're alive," as if that was news to him. He wrote about, "Sometimes healing looks like chaos. You start to rebuild, and then everything you thought was solid starts breaking again, just in quieter ways." After I burned that letter, something inside me shifted. Not all at once, not like freedom in movies, more like air returning to a room that's been locked for too long. I could breathe again, but the air still smelled like smoke. I stopped going to the diner as much. Donna got sick that winter and the place closed for a while. Without her, the city felt bigger, emptier. I started walking at night, nowhere in particular, just to move. There's something strange about being outside when the streets are half asleep. You can almost believe you're the only person left in the world. That's when I met Jonah. He was painting a wall behind an old theater, spray cans lined up like soldiers, headphones on, music leaking out. He looked up when I passed and said, "You can tell a lot about a person by how they look at color." I laughed, mostly out of confusion. He said, "You just looked at that blue like it hurt." I didn't know what to say. He asked if I wanted to try. I hesitated. I'd never touched a spray can in my life. But he handed it to me and I pressed down. The sound was soft, like air escaping a secret. The paint spread messy and bright. For the first time in years, I didn't care about being careful. We met again a week later. Then again. I didn't realize we were becoming friends. Look, it just happened. He never asked about my past, never tried to fix me. We just talked about colors, music, sometimes silence. He said he'd grown up in foster care. I said, "Then you know about disappearing." He nodded. "Yeah," he said, "but sometimes you have to vanish to learn what you look like when you come back." That line stayed with me. I started painting again, this time bigger. Old boards, broken doors, anything I could find. The walls in my tiny room became a storm of color. I didn't care if it looked good. I just wanted it to exist. It was like proof I was still here. Then came the dream. I was back in my father's house, but everything was smaller. The walls closing in, the air thick. I was sitting on that same couch, except now he was the one afraid. I woke up shaking, but instead of running from the feeling, I wrote it down. For once, I didn't want to forget. Writing turned into storytelling. I started reading at open mics, small, dimly lit rooms where people spilled their pain into microphones. The first night, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. My voice cracked halfway through, but no one laughed. They listened. When I finished, someone in the back said softly, "Thank you." After that, I went every week. It wasn't therapy, but it was something close. The more I spoke, the less power the memories had. I wasn't trapped inside them anymore. I was shaping them into something else. Jonah came once. He stood in the back, quiet, watching. Afterward, he said, "You make silence sound like music." I didn't know what to say. Compliments still felt like warnings. But I smiled anyway. We started spending more time together. Coffee, painting, long talks that went nowhere and everywhere. There was no romance, no promises, just presence. For the first time in my life, that was enough. One night we painted a mural together, a giant pair of hands reaching toward the sky. He asked, "What do you want them to hold?" I said, "Nothing, just the air." He nodded. "That's freedom, right?" When we finished, I stepped back and looked at it. The colors were wild, uneven, alive. I realized it didn't matter if anyone understood it. I did. That was new, but healing isn't linear. There were still nights I couldn't sleep, still mornings I woke up certain I was doomed to repeat the past. Some ghosts are stubborn. They like to visit when you least expect them. But I stopped trying to fight them. I just let them pass through, like weather. One evening, at the group meeting, a new woman showed up. She couldn't stop shaking. She said she hadn't slept in 3 days, that she was scared of her own house. Her voice broke halfway through, and I felt something deep inside me twist. Afterward, I sat next to her and said, "There's a point in healing where you stop looking for an ending. You just start living." I didn't notice when that shift happened. Maybe it was the morning I woke up and didn't feel afraid. Maybe it was the afternoon I forgot to hate myself. Or maybe it was nothing dramatic at all. Just a slow, invisible peace settling into the cracks. My room looks different now. The walls are covered in paintings, storms, skies, hands, faces I don't remember drawing. Every color means something. Every brushstroke feels like a sentence I didn't know how to speak before. Sometimes Jonah drops by with new cans of paint. Sometimes he just sits in silence while I work. I like that kind of silence, the kind that doesn't demand anything. I've learned that safety isn't a place. It's a rhythm. Waking up, making coffee, stretching in the sun. Simple things. Things that used to feel impossible. Now they're sacred. I still go to meetings. There's a new girl now, barely 20. She sits where I used to, near the door, ready to run. The first time she spoke, her voice was paper thin. "I keep thinking it was my fault," she said. The room went quiet. I told her, and it never is. She looked at me like she wanted to believe me, but didn't know how yet. I remember that look. I had it once too. Sometimes I wonder what happened to my father. I don't search for him, but I still think about the space he left. Not his presence, but the absence of it. That empty space used to ache. Now it just exists. I've learned to live beside it, the way you live beside an old scar. You don't forget it, but it stops bleeding. I used to think forgiveness meant saying, "It's okay." Now I know it just means, "I'm done carrying this." I don't forgive him for what he did. But I forgive myself for surviving it the only way I knew how. That's enough. One evening, I went back to the ocean, the place I used to walk by when I was still learning to breathe again. The wind was sharp, the air salty. I stood there barefoot, watching waves crash against the rocks. Every sound felt like a heartbeat. The sky was bruised with color, purple, gold, gray, like it couldn't decide between storm and sunset. I understood that feeling. For years I wanted to be someone else, someone untouched, unbroken, normal. But now I look at the woman I've become and realize I wouldn't trade her for anyone. She knows how to survive fire without turning to ash. She knows how to turn pain into art, silence into strength. She knows how to love without disappearing. People ask me sometimes if I'm happy. I tell them happiness isn't a place you arrive, and it's a moment you notice, like laughter over coffee, or a song you forgot you loved. Or the simple truth that you made it another day. I still have bad dreams. I still wake up shaking sometimes. But now instead of hiding from them, I write. I paint, I breathe. That's how I fight back, Osmofan, by creating something beautiful out of what tried to destroy me. I found the journal I used to keep when I first left home. The pages are stained, fragile, trembling with old fear. On the last page I'd written one sentence. I want to live a life that doesn't hurt. I smiled reading it. Because now I do. Not because the hurt is gone, but because it doesn't own me anymore. When I walk through the city now, I see stories everywhere. Not just pain, survival, kindness, laughter, people trying their best to stay human. Sometimes I catch my reflection in shop windows and don't look away. That feels like victory. Jonah says I should show my art in a gallery someday. I laugh and say, maybe, but deep down I know I will. Not for money, not for validation, not but because every color, every line, every word is proof that I existed. That I made it out. Before I go to sleep, I open the window and let the night air in. Somewhere in the distance, someone's playing music. The sound drifts through the streets like a lullaby. I whisper, "Thank you."